Got an hour till the sun sets. Ooh. This isn't the most ideal of angles, but you know. So today we're going to talk about fasting. Have any of you ever fasted? Um, Yesterday was the last day of my fast, which doesn't mean that I've really stopped fasting. And it doesn't mean that how I was fasting is like what most people would think of as fasting. A lot of people would think that today I'm still fasting, and I still think I'm fasting because I have to control what I'm eating. Some people could just call that dieting, but I've never, well, that's not entirely true. I've sometimes put myself on weird diets, but not for any logical reason. When I was younger, I would go through phases where I'd be like, this week I'm only going to eat peanut butter and bananas. Or this week I'm only going to eat Twizzlers and Doritos. They were particularly healthy fasts. Maybe the peanut and bananas were a little better than the Twizzlers and Doritos. But I grew up eating garbage food, frozen pizza pockets. Depending on your diet, that is to say, what you regularly eat, there are lots of different fasts you can do. A fast that I've never done but I've been very interested in is the compression diet. I remember reading about it in a book of fasts in my 20s. And they said for people they didn't use the term vegan because it wasn't as big a thing, I guess, when this book was written. This book was probably from the 60s or 70s or 80s, I don't know, 70s probably. And, but what they meant was vegan, that basically if you're vegan, you can do a fast where you just eat brown rice and don't drink water. And you can do it for like a week. Be like, and it's called a compression fast. And you're like, why would you want to do that? Well, why would you want to do any fast? There's there's so many layers as to why you'd want to fast. And I was introduced to this type of fast that I did this time somewhere in my 20s. But the first fast I ever did that I thought of as a fast was when I was 20 years old and I had first moved to Portland, Oregon. It was 1999. And I think I'd like read about a juice fast and not read enough. It wasn't the internet days, it wasn't the infinite knowledge. So it was just like really easy to just make shit up and think you knew what you were doing, which it still is, really. But you can fact check things now, where it was harder then. And so that time I did a 2 week fast, but I was just buying juices from like a health food store. So sometimes I buy fresh made smoothies, which is a healthier kind of like whole food thing. But most of the time I was just buying like organic juice, Knudsen jars. Do you guys know that company? They're usually in these type of jars. And I just drink juice and water, I guess, juice and water for 2 weeks. I don't remember a lot of how that fast made me feel. But the thing I will never forget about that fast was when I came off of it, I went to one of my favorite Thai restaurants in the Southwest, Southeast, in the Southeast. I don't remember if it was on Yam Hill or it was the street just north of Yam Hill, which is just missing from my brain right now. It wasn't Division. Division is south. But anyway, I only lived in Portland in 1999, and I lived there for 9 months or so, and I don't remember. Anyway, there was this Thai restaurant there, and I loved it. So I don't remember if it was like a day after the fast or 2 days after the fast, but I know I hadn't eaten meat yet. And I got a red curry with probably duck, because I love red curry duck, but it might have been pork or chicken. I don't know. But what I do know is that when I put the meat in my mouth, I felt the pain and misery and suffering that animal had to endure. like being in a cage and just being tortured, and the cramped cord, all of that emotion carried in the meat. And I was like, oh. And I thought, wow, that is a good selfish reason for being a vegetarian, because having to eat meat, which is delicious, right? Um, it like infiltrates our body with the resonance of the emotional life those animals lived. You are what you eat, right? I was like, oh my god, and we don't feel it because we eat it all the time. It's normal. Um, like the last thing I did, normal. It's just normal, right? Slavery, eating things that have been miserable and eating their misery. I don't think it was the next year. I don't think it was until 2003, maybe, that I was introduced to the Master Cleanse, which is what I just did this time. Which is not like, I don't know if you would say it was as nourishing as just drinking a whole bunch of random juice, most of it already pasteurized. Um, but it's got a benefit of fresh squeezed lemon, so there's some live active enzymes in there. And then maple syrup, which is not live and active, but has a lot of sugar and minerals in it. And lemons have some minerals in it. And then you put cayenne in there, which is not alive. I mean, it's processed food, cayenne powder. I've never tried to use like fresh, like juicing cayenne. That would be interesting. But I've done it, I think this was my 8th time. If I remember correctly, I did it 6 years in a row, where I did it once a year for 10 days to 2 weeks, depending on what mood I was in. Um, and even saying 2 weeks or 10 days is kind of iffy, because you've got to like ease into it and ease out of it. You don't have to ease into it, but you usually do. It's wise. And I guess you don't have to ease out of it. My brother said he did it for 28 days once and ended it by eating a vegetarian burrito. He said it was vegetarian. I'd shoot it really slowly, and I was like, but yeah, it's just fresh squeezed, 2 tablespoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of grade B, which no longer exists, dark maple syrup, and a pinch or to taste of cayenne pepper. A tenth of a teaspoon was one of the recipes, and I generally would build it up as is. So I'd start lightly at the beginning of the cleanse and then add more and more and more cayenne. And the idea, if I remember correctly from reading the book, which I did not read again this time, had to do with altering the pH of your body. So if you have any parasites, if the pH shifts, they can't survive in your environment. If it shifts, like a lot of bacteria, and I don't know about viruses, but probably bacteria and viruses and parasites. If you shift your pH enough, which is not a lot, they can't survive in a changed pH environment and they die. So that's one of the ideas. The other idea is that the lemon and cayenne cuts all the mucus in your body and doesn't produce mucus and clears the body out. And if you don't put a lot of solid matter in your body, you don't defecate much. So you drink a quart of salt water every morning, and if you need to have a little bit of laxative tea at night, herbal laxative tea like senna or cascara sagrada. And my mom had a senna tincture because we have senna growing outside, so I just used a little of that every night. And you spray it out, it just washes out your whole alimentary canal and gives you more minerals. If your body needs any minerals, it pulls it out of that salt water, which is good. And I remember in the first few years I did that I always did it, except the last 2 times, at my friend Leo's house up in the mountains of Northern California, where I had the luxury to sit around and do nothing. My mother, oh, that's nice. My mother was introduced to this fast by a friend of hers, or a guy that came to the place she worked, who was a house painter. And he would do it for 40 days, most of the times he did it. So she was like, oh. And I thought, well, I'm kind of skinny, so maybe I shouldn't do it for 40 days. And I would often lay naked in the sun and read books and spend a lot of time on the internet, generally because I was alone up in the mountains. I did it once in Tennessee, and one of the times I did it in the mountains, I did it with Leo. One of the times, and the time I did it in Tennessee, I did it with my friend Goat. Um, and it was very interesting to do it with my fat friends, my indicarmaches, because they wouldn't like you don't lose a dramatic amount of weight on it, I would say. I mean, I've never done it to lose weight. They give a thing in there like it's 2 teaspoons of maple syrup and 2 teaspoons, or no, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup and 2 tablespoons of lemon. But they say if you're trying to lose weight, you can make it to 1 tablespoon, sorry, of maple syrup. And I know that it got famous recently because Beyonce did it to lose weight for some movie she was in. But I never really did it to lose weight. And the guys that I gave it to, I don't remember if they did less maple syrup. But one of the things that's amazing is because it reduces inflammation in the body and it doesn't produce mucus and it helps purge mucus. Their faces deflated. And it taught me that like bear faces, like these big chubby cute bear faces were, a lot of that was inflammation and mucus, which I was just like, wow. And it was very interesting to see my friends' faces deflate because again, it's not like they lost a lot of weight. It's just the mucus and the inflammation was purged from the body. And that was like, wow. So that was I feel like that's enough of a sign. And I've never had a miraculous healing from this cleanse. I was kind of hoping for it because I've had a messed up shoulder for almost a year. But it didn't miraculously heal my shoulder because it's still hurting a lot. But with both of these bear friends of mine who did it, one of them, Leo, had tinnitus for over 20 years, constant ringing in his ears, and it just stopped and went away. And as far as I know, it never came back. And Goat had a severe pain in his foot. He said it was like a heel spur and it hurt every time he walked, and it just went away. And it was gone for at least months. I know it came back for him. But the last 2 times I tried to do it, once was in this house up in Vermont, and it was cold as fuck and super. I mean, it wasn't cold as fuck. It was just like early spring in Vermont. Not even northern Vermont, but Vermont's northern, and it was just cold and unpleasant. It's very unpleasant to fast when you're cold. And then the time I tried to do it after that was in New York City. And I remember I had started going to doctors. I hadn't gone to doctors for years, but I was HIV positive. So I had to go to a doctor. And my friends had convinced me I had to go to doctors and get blood work and stuff. So I remember getting blood work while fasting. Just passed out, like vagus nerve response. Bad. And I wouldn't do that now. I would think that was a terrible idea. Like, you don't want to rebuild your blood cells when you're fasting. Oh, well. But so about like this kind of fast, I'll get into other fasts in a minute. My mind can. I'm still pretty spacey. There's pretty great effects to fasting besides the idea of purging mucus and inflammation and pH balancing and all that stuff. Like, that's great, but there are things that are really nice. One of them is this test of willpower. When I was younger, I was really into tests of willpower, which I haven't been in recent years. I don't know, this Mercury retrograde spun me in a direction where I was like, I've got to do blogging again, and I don't know. It's not that different, I suppose. I've been doing blogging once a year for most of the time, but I hadn't done a birthday project in quite a few years. So there's this feeling where you're like, I want to go ride my bike. I want to go jogging. If you have that thing, I want to do push-ups. I want to have sex. I want to eat a hamburger. I want to have some pizza. I want a milkshake. I want a kombucha. I want a chocolate bar. There's all these different wants we have, right? Desires. And it's really nice, I think, to give yourself the opportunity to say, no, I don't need any of that. And this is fine, and it's enough. the thing about a long fast like this, a juice fast, is the first 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 days usually, but sometimes the fourth is kind of hard. Um, it's difficult because your body is so dramatically altered from what it's used to, which is generally getting whatever you want whenever you want it, and involving food and many other things. Um, and all of a sudden you're severely restricting your diet into like a mono diet. So again, this fast can be seen as like a mono diet cleanse. The salt water is definitely a weird thing, but that most people don't do. But if you imagine just living off lemonade, you could just live off Coca-Cola for a week, honey. But anything you just choose to live off of one thing for a period of time is a mono diet. I've done that with kitchery for 3 months, though I didn't think of it like that at the time. Um, but when you choose that you're only consuming one thing, it it's a test of will in that every time you want something else, you just have to say like, no, I don't need that. I'm just doing this for this amount of time. And I know that as a massage therapist, when I work on people and I find things that could benefit them, or tell them things that could benefit them, like stretches or yoga postures or exercises or qigong exercises, anything, or even dietary things, I'll always say like, just do it for a week or two. Just imagine, just commit to doing it for 2 weeks. You don't have to think about doing it for the rest of your life or for 7 years or for a whole year or many months. Just 2 weeks. Just commit to doing it for 2 weeks and you'll notice what it does to you. And it won't seem like you have to do it forever. If you can just, I don't know how effective that is for most people, but for me, it's really effective to just say, again, like these birthday projects, I'm just going to make sure I post something every day for my birthday. Um, every time I do these kind of projects, I give them, like when I was in Mexico last year and I was like, I'm just going to post something every day for 6 weeks. But that was at least more controlled. That was a better example of just being like, I'm going to make a 1 hour video every day at the exact same time for 6 weeks. Um, and then I did other things randomly, and that was fine as long as I adhered to that one thing. And so fasting, it does these twofold things. Like it gives you this willpower game of like, okay, I'm only going to do this. But then that weird restriction gives you a huge amount of freedom because you don't have to make choices in areas where you usually have to make choices. So when you're eating, you have to prepare, you have to clean up, you have to prepare, cook, clean up, and eat, which takes many hours a day if you think of how many meals we eat. And the fasting thing, like you can streamline it. I made concentrate at the beginning of the day. So I'd juice a whole bunch of lemons and limes, mix it with the right balance of maple syrup, put cayenne pepper in it, and then put that in a jar. And then every time I wanted to refill my jar of lemonade, this is orange juice, but I would just pour that in a jar, dilute it with water, and drink it. So there was like one time of the day that I was preparing and cleaning up. And never did I have to go, oh, what do I want to eat for dinner? I'm hungry, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just have some cheesy puffs or chips, and well, maybe I'll go and get some fast food. Like, you don't make terrible food choices because you're lazy and tired, because you just aren't making food choices, And it's weird to say this, but there's been a lot of studies done about choice fatigue. Like how you can only make so many choices a day and then you kind of lose the ability to make decisions. So fasting also gives you this whole, it just alleviates a whole bunch of choices that you have to make. So that psychological thing of like stealing your will and then giving you freedom of mind, like I just don't have to make choices in this whole arena that I usually have to make choices all the time. One of the other wonderful effects of fasting, and this is something that I apply to many different areas of my life, is that when you stop doing something that you love doing, in this case, eating ice cream and popcorn and pizza and whatever the hell you love eating, salads, I don't know. I've got this whole garden out there of kale that I can't eat right now, but I will in a few days. When you come back to food, it is such an amazing experience. The way it tastes and smells and feels and the way it makes your body feel. And hopefully, if you're not eating stuff that you feel the echoing suffering of beasts, then it's a joyous experience. But likewise, giving up sex, giving up music, giving up reading, giving up writing, giving up anything you love doing. And I've done this with so many things in my life. Anything I love doing, I just stop for a while. And sometimes that while is 2 weeks, and sometimes that while is many months. Or in this case, birthday projects for many years. It's or blogging, journaling. Anyway, anything you love doing, and even things you don't like doing that you feel like you have to do. If there's some things that you could just stop doing for a while, and when you go back to doing them, especially if it's something you love, when you go back to doing it, you have the opportunity to greet it in a new way. You've changed slightly. Well, that's gone on. So your habits have gotten a chance to kind of die off. It's very easy to return to our old habits, but having the break gives you a chance to greet it anew, and you get to appreciate aspects of it again that you've been taking for granted, and hopefully learn something and do something in a new way. Having long hair, it's the same kind of thing. Having long hair, letting the hair go, and then when it grows back, if it grows back, I'll have a new relationship with it again. And it's just so nice to do. Can't encourage it enough. It's raining again outside. It sounds really nice. The cold air coming into my room through the window. So a lot of us have just had to give up a whole lot. Like traveling, like being social, like going to sex parties. One of my friends on Facebook, I just went to the bear sex party in New York and I haven't been in a year and a half or something, and it's so great. And I'm just like, my sister just went to a music festival that had been canceled and rescheduled. We're all kind of returning to something that we had to give up. So it's so nice. I know this message has been repeated in a whole bunch of different media, but to be able to allow ourselves to be anew in the way we deal with things. And the meditation retreats I've done, they're very similar to a type of fast. Like you're fasting from society, from social interaction, from selfing, speaking. And if you're a meat eater, you're fasting from meat because they're vegetarian. I guess that's really all I wanted to say about fasting. I'm glad I did it. Some people have said, like, well, is this healthy for you? I mean, aren't you going to be malnourished or something? And I'm like, okay, most people are malnourished anyway from the garbage food they live off of all the time. Like people who live off processed food constantly, they're malnourished already. You can eat, and that's one of the things that's amazing about our country. You can be fat and malnourished at the same time. But I think in all the ways that I've just outlined, I think it's healthy. And apart from any of the physical benefits that I outlined, which may just be pseudoscience or spurless at best, there's a fun phrase to say, you still get these other opportunities to take a break from what you're doing. And just know that if you're interested in doing fast, you can do it across any of the strata of things you do regularly. And you can think of, if you're having trouble with cigarettes or caffeine or alcohol, to just think of it like a fast. I know a friend who gave himself a year off from porn, um, alcohol, and maybe it was all drugs. I think it was all drugs. And something else. I don't remember. I think it was a third thing. But I know that when when that year was up, he just decided he didn't ever want to drink again. And I mostly didn't do drugs at all until just recently, and it was a ritualistic experience, so it wasn't really doing drugs. And that time that he wasn't masturbating to porn, he got not just one boyfriend but two boyfriends, and after a while, just one. So it just gives space in your life for things to change. And, we all want things to change. So if you're like struggling with cigarettes, you don't have to think, okay, I'm going to give this up for my whole life. I'm just going to give it up for a month, see what that's like. It takes a while for our bodies to change. And similarly, well, I guess this is a different story, but habit forming. You could give up relaxation or give up sleeping enough and work out in the gym every morning or go for walks and just see what your life is like by adding or subtracting habits. Well, maybe I'll put a link in the bio to this cleanse that I did if you're interested in looking at it. But of course, you can Google all sorts of different fasts that are good for you. Oh, there was another fast that I did regularly. That was a food-oriented fast that I remember. I think a friend in Switzerland introduced me to it, if I remember correctly. He was into a type of martial arts called Systema, like a martial arts from Russia. And one of the fasts they recommended was once a month, not having anything to eat or drink for a 24-hour period. So after dinner, which they would recommend having an early dinner, after dinner, you don't eat or drink anything until that same time the next day. And I did that regularly for a few years. Just once a month, taking a day off of food. And I know so many like Jewish friends who go through all these strange fasts of like, oh, well, it's a 16-hour fast or it's a 27-hour fast or something. So even if you don't think you want to do a complete lack of solid food like I've done. And I do remember in the fasting books that I read, it's generally not recommended to do a long fast of just water, which is what's called a water fast. Some people would call that a complete fast, but maybe a complete fast would mean nil by mouth, no water even. But those are generally not recommended for people because you can die if you don't drink any water. It can kill you. And although there are a lot of people who don't drink any water and they just get all their water from the food they eat, that is a whole health belief system. But you can really deplete yourself by just drinking water all the time with no food. So you could do that for a couple days, but they don't recommend doing that like in a long period of things. Long period. But generally giving yourself, anytime you do a non-solid food thing, it's really good to do some kind of purging cleanse, like the salt water thing, because you don't want to let all the stuff that your body's trying to digest and get rid of just stay in your gut. I don't think I did a saltwater cleanse the first time I fasted for 2 weeks. I don't know what that did to my gut, but I don't remember. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. I'm obviously spacey. I've been writing today, which is nice. And just relaxing. It's the new moon day. Hi, new moon day. I slept well last night, and I hope to sleep well tonight, and I hope you sleep well tonight, though you probably won't see this video tonight. I hope you sleep well tonight anyway. Love to you.